and we're going live shortly. So I just thought this is an amazing movie. Don't Look Up is I think it's a masterpiece. Honestly, I know a lot of people are kind of slating it, whatever. Um, oh shit, I'm echoing now. Okay, but yeah. So what did you think, Sophia?
Well, I am the opposite of you. I'm not a cinephile. I rarely ever watch movies. But what happened with this movie, which I wasn't aware about all this, fuss about it. So what happened is that one day, I think it was Christmas or day before Christmas, I was feeling ill. So I was like, okay, I can't do anything productive. Let's watch something. And now the reason why I chose the movie was primarily the actors. So the cast is very strong. But I liked the movie. It showed me the reality of politics and how politics interfere with everyone's lives practically. But later, I mean, I finished the movie. I really liked it, and then I started getting bombarded in social media about this idea that this movie was supposed to be funny or comedy, which I didn't see it as a comedy. I didn't laugh. I found it very serious. The messages were very serious. Uh, um, I didn't laugh. I can say that, but it did make a strong impression on me.
Why did you not laugh? Maybe and maybe I'll get some introductory some comments also from Natalia and then Saad.
Ladies first then. Um, I actually I didn't realize that it was supposed to be funny, and I just watched it thinking this is, like a serious thing. And then there was like obviously these kind of like comedic kind of threads throughout it, which I didn't really understand the kind of intent initially because I was like, this is a serious movie, but it's funny. But at the same time, it's funny in a really kind of like tragic way, like the fact that, I mean, like there's so many elements to that, but it was sadly funny, but at the same time, I find parts of it really quite witty. Like I loved the way she went on about that girl, Kate, the lady that kind of discovered the comment. I love the way she continued to talk about snacks, for example, throughout the whole movie, like right up to the end. you know, that was where she was, and I find that really interesting from like a human perspective about like what the psyche is able to kind of comfortably kind of scrutinize, tolerate. Sometimes these big events, these big things are just too much for us to really handle. Or there's that distance element, like, it's 6 months and 14 days. So, it's kind of like in the future, and it's difficult to kind of really kind of future pace that and see that as an imminent event. Although obviously Kate, I would say, was probably one of the characters who grasped that from the very beginning, more so than even Dr. Mindy, I would say, personally speaking.
Well, this
Um,
is the moment when she goes into the kitchen to get more snacks, and then she asks the woman sitting at the table, where do I pay? And she's like, they're free. And she's like, they're free. She's like, yeah, it's the White House. And then she's like, but completely baffled as to why this general, right, charge the money when it's literally free. And then she finally figures it out. She's like, it was a power move. The whole thing was I can do whatever the hell I want, and no one can say anything. I mean, it's hilarious.
which
Um,
is a really smart and simple way of putting forward the whole problem with like capitalism as a concept. This idea that even when you don't have to shit on someone, for lack of a better term, you're probably still going to do it.
that's brilliant. I love that. And to continue with introductory remarks, Saad, some of your thoughts.
Right. So I did find it funny, but again, simultaneously, it was also really depressing. I think what for me, it wasn't um, it wasn't surprising or it wasn't shocking because it sort of leaves you with this pessimism about, can we really help this condition? Okay, we are like that as a society, as a people. Is it really practical to think that things could be different, or in the foreseeable future? can we actually change this, or is this not how we are, anyway going to react in the future, and this is how people are going to take it? I mean, both our reaction to it as well as climate change, isn't it inevitable? And I mean, isn't so I mean, that kind of leaves that stark pessimism. But within that, there is the comedy, or the dark comedy, that this is life and this is what it means to be human being in these times.
Right. And maybe Sophia, you'd like to come back to why you didn't find it funny, and maybe Saad kind of was speaking a little bit to that as well, the dark comedic aspects of the movie.
It could be this, it could be a different sense of humor, because I mean, I'm coming from a different society. Maybe I have different understandings of what is funny and what is not. But to me, to add to what Saad said, I had this, I mean, what I liked from the movie more than anything is that the movies I'm used watching produced in the USA are all about, at the end, the good Americans save the world. But in this one, the world was not saved. And this was the difference. It was realistic. I mean, I saw realism in there about how politics play with the important problems, how people are being portrayed in the media according to whatever the media think that sells, and of course, the inevitable. So I really liked this realism. And of course, I mean, I had the same thoughts with that. Like, is it inevitable? Is it nothing we can do? Will we change? But the way I want to see it is that through exposure to realism, because nobody speaks, everybody knows, but nobody talks. So through art in the form of a movie, people will get to stand up and say, no, that's not how it should be. And I believe that it will add, because art at the end of the day aims to assist or change mindsets. But I honestly didn't find it, even the aspects that they were supposed to be funny, for me they were tragic. They were like, that's not funny, it's serious. And
what can you think of some examples?
Yeah, I mean, in the Ella Oval Office, where was the lady president, and they were talking about the disaster, and she was talking about her image and how smoking in public eventually lift her numbers and stuff like that. That was not funny for me. That's the truth. It was vivid that the priority is me and me staying on power. So I will grab on power, and who are you? Or the belittling of educational institutions based on name, when they said, oh, we're coming from this institution, they were like, okay, bring some Ivy Leagues in. I mean, we don't pay attention to you. What is that? So you see how everything has to do with name, with marketing, with branding, with money, whereas the real point is being missed. And I didn't find it funny. I'm sorry, I didn't. Yep, that's the point. That's the point.
This is the moment, right? I mean,
yes, that's the moment.
I wish I could play some of it, but we'll be hit with some copyright issues.
Yes, so this is the
so
point.
she's like, they're talking Mindy, right? DiCaprio's character, sort of, and Lawrence's character, Dibiasky, right? They're trying to get through to these people, the president and his son, right? And they clearly know, and all of a sudden she sort of exclaims, and they think, oh, maybe they got through to her, and then she starts talking about the cigarettes and how she found the cigarettes, and this whole story about how when she was running for election, she had to hide, but then she got caught, and these pictures would sell for like $100,000 a pop, and then she stopped hiding it, then her ratings just shot through the roof. And it's, I mean, in a very real way, and some people have commented, right? I mean, it's a relatively obvious enough point to make, but worth making nevertheless, remaking, which is that some have said that this character, Meryl Streep's character, is reflective of Trump, right? And how his attitude was. You have, Natalia made, I remember, a very interesting point on that, in that regard, like how, could you speak a little bit to her son and his relationship to her, and what that says, how that reflects somehow Trump's thing?
Yeah, I was kind of whenever I watched it, Trump automatically came to mind. I don't know whether it's just the colors kind of involved, and I think at one point she's kind of wearing a hat in the movie as well, like a cap. And then obviously there's the nepotism within the White House, keeping it within the family and family promotions, with the son being chief of staff, even though he's quite clearly underqualified and like totally not a good fit for that position. um, but I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought it was good as well that they switched that from like a biological sex perspective and made it a woman instead, so you kind of had
Yeah.
it's the same understanding and message, but it's switched up a little bit, which I find was kind of interesting dynamic, because it still exists. Doesn't matter if it's the father or the mother in that position. Either way, you still have the same family dynamics. If you take your family into positions of power with you. And I thought I thought like the sexual scandals. I loved how they kind of, and because it's just literally that is life, sex sells. So
I mean, sticking with sticking with the son and the mother, because you mentioned this when we were chatting about this separately, like the incestuous undertones.
Oh,
Right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like if you take Trump, for example, right? So there's a couple of scenes within the movie where the son says, I would rather, there's no other president, I think it was, that I would rather be in Playboy.
Yeah.
That's his own mother, right? Then he said something like at one of the Don't Look Up kind of rallies, he said, oh man, if she wasn't my mother, or something like this here,
Yeah, right.
Trump said exactly the same thing about Ivanka Trump. He was like, if she
Yes,
wasn't my daughter, I'd probably
exactly.
date her, or something like that, to paraphrase,
Exactly.
So it was
Yeah.
kind of, I thought it was that immediately kind of jumped out to me.
I have a very dark sense of humor, so I'm like, I can barely contain myself now, even as we talk about, because it's hilarious. I mean, it's darkly humorous, right? I mean, I'm British, so maybe that plays a significant role as far as that's concerned. But thanks for that, Saad. Any further thoughts on any of that? Oh, but Natalia, you're going to say something else before I interrupted about the.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say hi. I find it interesting that the the sexual scandals relating to the president and the White House, the armpit photo, or the I don't know if you picked up on that. So it was like, oh,
armpit photo.
yeah. Did you hear that bit?
Remind me, I think I missed it.
It wasn't their armpit.
Oh,
They
wait,
said there was a photo that was initially presumed to be an armpit or
was,
a man's beard.
oh no. Oh, I see. No, it's her private parts. Right. Okay. No, I forgot. Yeah.
So it took me like the second time I'm watching it to really kind of pick up on that bit. And I was like,
hilarious.
oh my God, they said what?
I mean, this movie is so well written, right? It's so insanely well written. But Saad, some thoughts?
Well, sorry for the disturbance on my end. It's the middle of the day over here and there's construction going on.
It's okay. It's life, man.
Right.
I don't really hear too much disturbance, so we're good.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's fine. Well, yeah. I mean, speaking of the mother-son dynamic, the scene that comes to my mind is is right at the end when the entire world has ended and that guy comes out and he's shouting for his mother. That's what came to mind. But another point which Sophia raised and which I think was, I mean, again at the heart of this movie is about the power of PR and how you can put a PR spin on anything and you can sell anything, you can sell any narrative. And how, of course, I mean, we might get to this later on, but the relationship that we have with scientific authority or with, and Neil Postman's phrase, the age of showbiz, really seems apt over here. We're really living in the age of showbiz, and you can ultimately beyond, I mean, more than facts, more than science, more than data. This is what really matters. And I mean, that's a whole segment in itself. I don't know if you want to get into that.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it was very it put me in mind immediately of George Orwell 1984. You know, some of the slogans that are associated with that. For example, actually there's one particular quote that immediately jumped out to me. Let me just find it here. Because it was the undercurrent of the whole movie, really.
Well, if I may fill the void until Natalia
Mhm.
finds what she's looking for, on what Sad said, at some point there is this very, for me it was very strong scene when DiCaprio talks to the guy who is the financier or the businessman, and DiCaprio clearly says that okay, are we going to do this for business? And that person stops and says, business? This is about progress. This is about evolution. It's how they try to sell everything under names that sound cheesy, and they sell those days, and they try to make to facelift companies having a humanitarian identity, whereas we saw at the beginning of the movie when this businessman was promoting the mobiles, how the children wanted to talk, and he was like, no, we have you there just to have the idea of a child, because whatever has the child as a in marketing sells. But the children were not even heard, and their emotions were not even responded to, and they were being grabbed the mobiles after they went out of the public eye. So all this idea of PR and how we promote it with under the banner or under the identity of humanity and evolution, and we do everything to improve your life, but in reality it's all about money.
Yeah, I find that actually very interesting as well, because for me it was like that was demonstrative of the industry of wellness and the profitability of mental health as an industry. And that really came across in those aspects with the children and the the app, stuff like that. That was what kind of really jumped out at me. This illusion, and there's a lot of illusions all the way through the movie. Um, and it's all about optics and perception and things like that, which I found was very interesting. But the kids one was particularly difficult, just because, like, obviously I'm a mother, and I thought, my God, there's no connection there. There's no human connection. You've got them kind of tapped into this app, but you're not listening to them. And, you just want to get them offside as quickly as possible. Is it any wonder they even need the app? If you kind of look at it that way. But what I was saying about the kind of connection to the George Orwell 1984, there's a quote in it that says, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." And that was literally the whole theme of the movie. You were told, don't look up. I mean, it was called Don't Look Up. You were to deny what you seen with your own eyes. I thought that was really interesting.
The slogan when they sort of this character Peter Urshewell, the owner of Bash, right? The slogan that comes up right with this app is "Life without the stress of living," which is really interesting. I mean, I thought that the commentary on, I'm continuing some of the thoughts that have already been started. The social commentary vis-a-vis the ways in which our technologies have literally taken over our lives in extremely profound ways that I don't think we're, for the most part, even beginning to realize, is a very, very important aspect. For me, it was a significant part of the movie. In some ways, even bigger than the threat of annihilation from this sort of celestial body, this comet. For me, that was an even bigger one, because we're another one of Neil Postman's phrases, the title of one of his most famous books, "Amusing Ourselves to Death." We're amusing ourselves to death. We're being amused to death, to the point where we can no longer connect with each other in any very deep, meaningful way. The way Urshewell, right, Peter sort of reacts to the little girl who wants to say something twice, once on stage, second time in person. Very, very telling. And to Sophia's point, right, when Mindy, right, DiCaprio's character, raises the question, it's almost blasphemous that you're essentially in some, I can't remember the exact language, but the exact words, but you're a businessman. He's like, businessman. What we're doing is part of human evolution. Where I can't remember if it was in the exact sort of
wording,
exact word, but in the same exchange. But he also mentions this is very serious sense that through tech companies, right? We're evolving, we're advancing the human condition, but also ultimately human beings will be able to inhabit the cosmos, right? There's a very, very, very real big push in Silicon Valley. None of this stuff is made up. Like the extent to which this movie is based in real life is actually very impressive for me. Some very serious people, major tech billionaires, believe that in order, I mean, we have Elon Musk, right, talking about the importance, for example, famously, he's one of the most famous examples, but not only, that we need to inhabit Mars in order to ensure the longevity of the species, right? But these tech entrepreneurs really genuinely take it way, way further. I mean, there's a very famous and influential futurist by the name of Ray Kurzweil, who's has multiple patents under his name. Statistically, they say he's been like he's in his 70s, I believe. So he's been inventing stuff for decades now, and he's quite well respected in Silicon Valley. He has a very senior position in Google, has done for a few years now. And they say that his predictions, which is remarkable, especially in the era of futurism, right, predicting things to come, as the word itself entails, it means predict, the 65% accuracy, which is insane. So this guy literally thinks Kurzweil, that we can reach the far reaches of the cosmos, which is fascinating and scary. And I mean, what does it mean about how we relate to one another? What does it mean about how we understand the human condition? How do we understand the human condition, so as far as this movie is concerned?
Right. No, this is a really interesting segment because I was listening to Brian Cox, the physicist, has done like a small video on the science behind this movie, or I mean, at least about the asteroid. And he was making the point that we don't have the technology, or even if we wanted to counter or deflect an oncoming asteroid, we would need at least 3 to 4 years to come up with a spacecraft, depending upon the kind of the object, the nature of the object that's going to hit us. We don't have that, and he made an interesting point that we, I think Chelsea and Man United combined, they spend more per year on their footballers' wages than we do as a civilization against asteroid protection. But apart from that, I think another really disturbing or concerning point for me is what is the I mean, there seems to be a limit to what we can accomplish in terms of scientific and technological advancement, in terms of the time limit that we have. Because the question for me is, can we actually come to that level of scientific advancement before climate change catches up with us, and before, as a civilization, we end up going extinct, or we end up going destroying ourselves? This is a really interesting point which John Gray makes in his book, John Gray's book Straw Dogs, where this connects with the connection between transhumanism and climate change on the other hand. Because the idea of transhumanism, that you can ultimately upload your consciousness in certain machine, and through that way you can have an immortal life. that idea doesn't consider the fact that these machines themselves are mortal, or these machines themselves will decay and will rot, and ultimately, uh, you know, through anything, through wars or through economic collapse, through all of these factors. So transhumanistic, utopias are really challenged by climate change and by the inevitable climate change that's going to occur.
As far as they're being challenged, I mean, they might retort, and the movie kind of captures this, of course. You have a handful of people, highly wealthy, in many cases older people, right? They're kind of cryogenically preserved, and it sort of fast forwards. Is it 22,000 years in the future, 25 something
Right.
as years into the future, and you
Yeah.
see like the men are typically not only, but they're older, some kind of pretty looking women apparently. Anyway, so they come out of this situation, and so the belief is we can overcome through technology. I mean, I agree with you, Saad, and Gray's sort of, and many other philosophers have been arguing against this notion that transhumanism can ultimately, or
Can
science.
I just,
yeah, please. Yeah,
can
yeah,
I just give a reference from this book?
yeah, please.
Okay, so he says that technological immortalists imagine that the society that exists today will last forever. In fact, by the time the techniques are available to bring them back to life, the frozen dead will long have melted away. War, revolution, or economic collapse will have laid waste to the cryonic mausoleums in which they silently await their resurrection.
What I
Right.
personally find interesting about that particular scene, I thought I thought when compared with the prayer that was read out, that was said at the final meal, and I thought the act of a final meal was very symbolic as well, theologically
Yeah.
speaking. But in the prayer they talked about grace despite pride, forgiveness despite doubt, love to soothe us in dark times, courage and acceptance. Now the final part for me was faith, okay? But what I found interesting from that was it was acknowledging the flaws of humanity. And when it then cut to the scene where they're on this new planet, firstly, most of these people, I don't know if you noticed, but they were all white. There was nobody else, right? So it was like totally
Right.
absent of any color. They're all older, kind of mostly predominantly older men. They didn't go there to start a new civilization. They went there to save their own asses because they're too old. How are they going to create a new civilization? How are they going to breed? They're past that. It's done. They went there only to save themselves, not to start over. And I find that really symbolic. And I also find it symbolic that they went there with the same mindset that was noted in the prayer for forgiveness at the last meal. They went there with that mindset. They learned nothing.
Wait, can you repeat that? They went with which mindset?
The same mindset, the arrogance, the
Oh, right,
pride,
exactly. Yes,
the
exactly.
same negative traits. They learned nothing from their experience on Earth. They brought it with them to a new planet. There's no saving people like that. They're just it's gonna be a continuous loop, and they're gonna become their own undoing again, regardless of where they are. That's what I thought.
Can I add on this scene, which I really liked it, and the semiotics that I received from this scene? It's one, the real boss throughout the movie. We see it throughout the movie, but we realize it in that final scene, is that the real person who controls everything is the businessman, the one with the money. This is one thing. The second thing is that they are all naked, which means the human idea of hierarchy, who is the president and who is a businessman and who is, doesn't exist. Because we see people, we assume they are wealthy, but we don't know what they are. They don't have any symbol that on Earth will make us understand or assume things about people. And the third thing, that even the mind, the person who was, who flew the drones and then took them to another planet, had no idea about life on this planet, had no idea about the reaction of the birds. And when the birds ate the president, he was like, oh, okay, whatever you do, don't touch them, don't pet them. So they had no idea where they go. So this whole to bring it to real life, this idea that might impress the masses about someone having the means and the funds to travel to Mars, let's say, you don't know what is there. So it's for him, it was all about doing the extra step, leaving a legacy, or doing what I think it's technology will help me do. But he had no idea about life. It was not about life at all. It was about technology practically.
Right, and what it's interesting, it's also very scary what these technologies are capable of doing, right? These are fundamentally data-driven technologies, right? These AI-based technologies, which some very serious people have been talking about this for some time, that whoever controls the data here on forwards, or has been the case for a number of years now, they control everything. They're in power. I mean, speaking of data, well, I'll make this slide in a second, but so based on crunching all this insane amounts of data, remember when they have this exchange, Mindy, DiCaprio's character, and Peter Urschel, the owner, the founder of Bash, they have this exchange, and Mindy's sort of critical of what they're doing with Bash, and Peter Urschel, he responds that we have how many millions or billions of points of data. We know everything there is to know about you. We literally knew that you'd have some major like prolapse or something gross, but they knew about that stuff before you even knew about it. We know that. Oh, this is interesting. I don't know if you guys I picked this up on like the second view, but and he says also, we know, almost to shut him up, right? Like the proverbial nail in a coffin. We even know how you're going to die, right? Peter Urschel says to DiCaprio's character, you're going to die alone. But of course, we find out later that he doesn't die alone, right? So it was wrong. The technology isn't as sophisticated as the technologists themselves think it is. But continuing a little more thought of, and as far as predicting stuff, right? So the president, she's curious, right? Meryl Streep's character, she's curious as to how she dies. She's like, oh, I want to know. Actually, don't tell me. No, please tell me, right? And then he says, according to the thing, you're going to be eaten by or killed by Bronterok. She's like, what's a Bronterok? And he says, we don't know yet. And then we find out. So in some ways it's anyway. But in real life, right, the power of data is phenomenal, because Netflix, right, as to mention an example, which is kind of, it's like we're watching this movie on Netflix, right, and Netflix, and it's kind of, as far as I'm concerned, I already said this, I think it's a brilliant movie, and not only that, I think it's genuinely a perfect movie. I couldn't find fault with it, to be honest. It's absolutely perfectly pitched, like perfectly, like the images, the music, the scenes, the colors, all perfectly done. And get this, Netflix bases its productions massively on data. It's a fundamentally data-driven enterprise. I remember coming across an article back in 2013, when 2013, I think, when House of Cards, the then sort of most expensive, lavish TV production, came out on Netflix. It was either $50 or $60 million for the first season, which is a phenomenal amount of money. And there's an article in Slate where the author was making the point that to this point, that Netflix is basically mining our data, and really they know inside out, like what our viewing habits are, where we pause, where we fast forward, on and on and on. And they can literally through data craft the perfect shows, perfect based on their audience, who they're trying to reach. And this is what they're doing time and time and time again. This is why Netflix has literally outstripped Hollywood in terms of what it's not necessarily the case that Hollywood has more finances, or maybe at this, I don't know the actual figures. For Hollywood is massive, as far as finances are concerned. But Hollywood lacks something that Netflix has and has been amassing over a number of years now, and which is data. And I'm going to pull up a quick article about this. Yes, please.
but Hassan, let's play the advocate of the devil. Why is this bad? Because personally, and let me give you the context. Personally, I'm someone that I'm very I appreciate technology, the way we have it and we use it. And I'm not talking about utopian or dystopian versions of technology. I'm talking about technology the way it is. And as someone that I'm old enough to remember, I lived an era when our only entertainment was TV, and we were being fed, spoon-fed trash in the name of culture. Why is wrong? Why is it bad? Or is it bad that now companies create products tailored to our mental and cognitive and emotional needs? Is that bad?
Yeah, I mean, Natalia, yeah.
Sorry, I wonder if it kind of links in a little bit with what was said when Mindy and Peter were talking when they had to look at, the drones that were going to be involved. Peter had said to Mindy, he said, he said you run towards pleasure and away from pain. And I thought that was really profound because for a number of reasons, not only because that's what we do as people, generally speaking, especially in today's society, but also because that's what Peter then eventually did in the final scene whenever he got on that ship and he went to another planet. He ran away from the pain towards his own pleasure. So it kind of became a self-fulfilling prophecy from that perspective. His own pleasure being his continued existence, his continued reign, his continued power and sphere of influence. He was the guy there saying, right, this is on the planet. These are the readings of this planet. He was in control. It wasn't the president, for example. So that was all about his pleasure. And I think from a data perspective, or certainly from, you'd said, Sophia, emotional meeting, these companies meeting our emotional needs. And I don't really think that they necessarily do all the time. I think it depends on, it depends a lot about each corporation's ethos. And whether or not there can really be that trust and integrity there, because it can go either way. Sometimes it can have, similarly to the app with the children, it can have the illusion of trying to help you, but it's not actually about that at all, And I wonder if it's the same for these corporations that have our data.
Yes, but look at us. We are 4 people that at some point in life we were strangers. I mean, I'm the latest edition, and we are here to discuss a product that we all liked. It spoke to us on different levels based on the data that this company has collected and created it. So yes, I do understand. And this is human nature. Human nature since the beginning of reported history. It always struggles between its fears and its expectations. So yes, and I'm again, I'm old enough to have lived in an era when the idea of mobile phones was scary and it will kill us, it will blow up on our hands, it will create cancer and whatever. And today we all live attached to our mobiles. And the same people that we live attached to our mobiles and we rely on them on our daily functions, which personally I believe that has improved my productivity and my quality of life. At the same time, we nag and we complain and everything. So yes, I understand the dangers, but I do see also the positives. I'm happy I watched a movie that was meaningful and created this community right now. And what we create is a product itself, rather than watching something that a rich man wanted to create in the 50s or in the 80s. And I'm just stuck watching it, not because I enjoy it or because it sparkles thoughts and, my mind, but because someone created it and I have nothing else to watch.
Sam, do you have any responses?
Yeah, right. Yeah, there are. Yeah, of course. I think there is the one perhaps positive to this scenario is that with platforms like Netflix, Amazon, the content creation has been democratized to a large extent, and so multiple new people and new opportunities have opened up in that sense. and that might also be another positive to it. But from the point of view of human nature that Sophia was mentioning, and Natalia as well, I think the basic question would be, how good is it to have our needs met? I mean, if this technology knows our needs and is curating this content to satisfy us, how good is that? How good is it to be satisfied? Because I'm thinking about if you think about the scenario that is there in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where our destruction comes not through some external power controlling us, but through our being utterly satisfied, being satisfied to the extent that we don't want to do anything else. I think frustration is somehow necessary to do something, to have some purpose or some
as well as boredom, right? I mean, I just pulled up this article.
Boredom and frustration, of course. Yeah. I mean, just one final point. This reminds me of course, recently I've been reading Hindu philosophy, and there is this idea that man or or woman or the human being turns towards God after being dissatisfied and disenchanted by all the other pursuits in life that he or she was pursuing. For example, your pursuit of pleasure or wealth or status, whatever. You're supposed to pursue these things, and then at a certain point, you will naturally reach a stage where you realize that these are not fulfilling you or satisfying you in the extent that, or in that sense, and that is what opens up the way to a spiritual life, according to Hindu philosophy.
I see Sophia's facial expressions disagreement. Before I ask, I want to hear from you. But could you, the sort of stages that are outlined in sort of traditional, to use that problematic term, Hinduism? What are the different stages? That do you remember what they're called?
Yeah, of course. So traditionally, they have these 4 stages of life, of course, where the first stage is that of the student, where you're supposed to seek learning and seek to improve yourself for the first 25 years of your life. And the second stage will be that of a householder. You're supposed to take up social responsibilities for another 25 years. And then there's the stage of where you sort of start detaching yourself from your responsibilities because your kids are now able to take care of themselves, and you're able to think about ethical and social issues in your society. And then finally, there comes a stage where you go to the forest and you become a forest dweller, and you just concentrate or focus on your relationship with God and spirituality, right? All these things. This is, of course, the traditional hierarchy, and I don't think it necessarily needs to be followed in that chronological order. We are multiply, inhabiting those stages simultaneously, but it does give a good way to think about these things, I think.
Beautiful. Thanks for that. Sophia, what's your riposte to that? Please.
Okay, so three main points to begin with. The first is that it's ironic that we talk about philosophies, but if we take a step behind and we think who wrote those philosophies, these theories, and I'm Greek originally, so we have philosophers, and I know with fact that those men that they left the legacy that we call today philosophy, and based on which humanity has improved theoretically, were written by comfortable people, not by the slaves, not by the sufferers. So this is one thing, the sources. The second thing, this idea of praising suffering as a necessity to reach a higher level of self. To many different civilizations, or in many different civilizations, I always perceive it as a means to, comfort the unlucky or the lower strands. It's the same idea that it existed 20 years ago, that money doesn't bring happiness, until eventually the collective today is like, you know what, money creates comfort and you can find happiness. It doesn't bring it itself, but you can't find happiness definitely if you're hungry. And when it comes to God specifically, because I am a very religious person, I believe that the attention has turned already, or is turning already, into gratitude. So it's not through suffering that it's the only path to find God. It's through gratitude, through having your comfort. And because you're comfortable, because you're not hungry, because you're not in fear of persecution, you're not in fear of death, you're not in fear of, you're not cold, then you can contemplate on your creator and you can have this healthy relationship, not the relationship that, oh, I suffer, so I come to you as my only safe space, but that I don't suffer and I come to you with gratitude for whatever I have. So again, back to technology and everything. Personally, I believe I am someone that in my life, I don't fear that much technology. And I believe that suffering is unnecessary if you can, and you, all of us, we will understand it, because theory is one thing, but practice is another. Those of us that we have children, will you ever force your child to suffer? Or if you had the option of letting your child suffer or comfort it, will you let it suffer? You wouldn't. Your heart wouldn't allow. So I don't believe that.
But Sophia, do you think, I mean, sorry to interrupt, I know you're not saying this, but do you think we can entrust these major tech companies with our well-being? Can we trust them? Like,
Here
can
comes
we ensure, I mean, are they not fundamentally interested in the bottom line? I mean, what's the arc of the story of the movie, right? That
exactly.
they could have deflected the comet. They literally could have. They stopped it because the comet had how many hundreds of I think like $150 trillion worth of rare minerals and materials.
But did you see in the movie the role of everyday people like us, like me and you and everyone? Where were they? What were they doing? You had one part, which were the scientists, the knowers, and then it was the money practically, or the companies. Let's put it the companies, because in reality that's what it was. One thing that we miss in the collective is that we have power. Technology gives us power. The way we use it is up to us. So if we are mindless and we don't make good use, yes, of course it will come against us, but it's not because of the technology. Everything can be, I mean, the knife, you can cut your food or kill yourself. It's the same thing.
Right. So this is the argument, right? This is the argument that tools and technologies in and of themselves are neutral. It's how we use them. However, I mean, that's not the case. I mean, every technology, whether consciously or unconsciously, especially digital technology, this is coming out more and more to the fore, that technologies necessarily have built into them the ideologies and worldviews of the people who create them. And this is a very important philosophical point that has to be grasped. And this is very, very much in the nature of, not least of all, digital technologies. I mean, you don't think so? So, Natalia, do you
someone
have
else?
any?
Yes, let's talk.
Yeah.
I can see, certain aspects of the points that Sophia is making. For example, surviving or thriving. So that's, your suffering or your comfort. And I understand that point. And I am a mother, so I understand the metaphor put forward about, watching your child suffer, for example. At the same time, though, I know that my kids also need to have certain lived experiences in order to build them as people, and that's a source of empowerment for them from an emotional and psychological perspective.
But Natalie, living experiences is one thing, suffering is another. We're talking about suffering.
Well, the issue is how are we defining suffering? What do we consider suffering to be, really? So if for example, if I tell my children not to do something, like the other day they were playing on the stairs, and I said to them, stop doing that. It's dangerous. You're going to fall down. You're going to break your neck. You're going to end up with a carpet burned down the side of your body. I mean, it's irresponsible. Stop playing in the stairway. And they continued, no, we're going to do it. And I said, fair enough. That's your decision. I have warned you. I've told you the consequences. And if you decide to continue to do this and you hurt yourself, I honestly don't want to hear about it because you were warned. So, because we had like 3 conversations about this. So from that perspective, had, they hurt themselves, for example, like the carpet burn as an example, which did subsequently come about, that's suffering from a pain perspective. but it was by their own decisions. And there's only so much I can do to manage that as a parent. If they're not willing to listen, then they're going to experience that regardless. You know, there's a sense of independence there and their own personal autonomy. And, you know, you can manage things to a certain degree, but you're never going to really eradicate suffering in all its many forms, even if you have comfort there as an option. Just depends on how people view suffering from a personal perspective.
Sophia, responses?
Well, we can continue forever in this discussion. But I think that the message that I wanted to express has been expressed.
Okay.
Yeah, diving into, you know, opening
Nitty-gritty.
every single notion, it will take us astray. So let's go back to the movie.
Well, so I mean, maybe to continue
Right.
with this, the sort of the substance of this discussion. I mean, this particular argument, right? Whether technologies enable us, to what extent do they enable us? To what extent do they disenable us? To what extent are they beneficial? To what extent are they harmful? I mean, hopefully, I mean, I try on a good day, but I don't do very well because I'm a hypocrite, and human beings, I think we're all hypocritical to a lesser greater degree, and depending on the time of day and our mood, etc., etc. But I think it's very important to be grateful. Gratitude is a fundamental religious principle, not least of all in Islam, but in all the traditions, right? Appreciating what we have, being grateful opens us up in ways which actually, psychologically speaking, it does away with negative emotions and things like that. So we have to cultivate gratitude on a regular basis, right? I think it's a
Right,
fundamental.
Hassan, could I also add just on the point of like technological advancement? It's there's it's not equitable. So you're going to have certain sections and global areas, geographical areas that will technologically advance, but that's at a cost and a detriment, and often at the exploitation of other sectors. And I think that's something that we kind of really need to acknowledge when it comes to, yes, these things can give us a source of
Well, so
comfort,
I mean,
and it can
to
meet our
illustrate your
needs,
point,
it
right?
can help us.
So they're up. Sorry, are you connections kind of coming in and out a little bit? But so they're both up in this spaceship, right? And they're calling, and the president, what's his name? Mindy says, "Well, you and what's the son's name played by Jonah Hill? I can't remember.
Jason.
What is it?
Jason.
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 Oh, yeah. And then Mindy's like, "Well, you and Jason have fun or take it." And the president was like, "Who's Jason?" And she literally forgets that she left her son to die. Well, and what I was trying to get to actually is, I mean, in addition to the inequitable nature of who gets to benefit from a technology, who doesn't, right? We have a highly stratified global society. Forget, putting aside the, you know, the so-called, 1% and the 99%, like, those of us who live in the West and those of us who have benefits, not just those of us who live in the West, but those who have the benefits of certain technological and financial and educational means in the global South, I think that they have to also be included in this kind of schema, which is to say that we represent the 1% in relation to the rest of the world. There are people literally who don't have clean drinking water. Malaria is literally it's a completely treatable. I mean, don't need to mention this to start. Saad's a qualified medical doctor. Malaria is completely treatable, right? And yet tens of thousands of children die every year. So who gets to benefit from these technologies? But also, I wanted to add, to kind of problematize, to try to have a multifaceted view. So on the one hand, I am certainly, I mean, to Sophia's point, if it were not for these technologies, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, right? I've never met Saad in person, and yet we managed to do some pretty cool stuff together. Sophia and I, none of us have met, but at the same time, so this is a point that is kind of front and center in the movie, and I forget, did Natalia, were you pointing to this as well, or Saad, or both of you, and Sophia maybe, the inextricable connection between power and these technology companies. In previous, earlier in the century, or not this century, the previous century, early in 20th century in the US, it was the industrialists, the steel magnates who controlled stuff, and they were fundamentally wedded at the hip with government. Today, it's the tech companies. So when we have that, because who gets to decide that? Did you make this point, Sophia, that who decided where things were going ultimately?
But
it was the tech company, right? So you said it yourself, right? I mean, in particular, this guy Peter Urschewald, right?
But let me tell you something here, because I love this discussion. So you see, you stated 5 minutes ago that okay, those who created the technologies put their standards, but this statement assumes that before we had these technologies, there were no standards, which is not true. You just said it. Someone always puts the standards, and this is human nature. When you have community, when you have more than 5 people, inevitably someone will be in power. In the ancient civilizations was the king or the priest or the god or whomever. Later on was the one who had the money, because we like it or not, and we can dislike it as much as we want, and we can go against capitalism, which is very sexy thing to do nowadays. But if you see how life was before capitalism, and if you see how life changed with capitalism, especially in the position of women and children, then maybe we will rethink. And that being said, before I will be bombarded, I don't support capitalism. I don't believe that nothing is panacea. Nothing is perfect. Everything that has human intervention at some point becomes faulty, out of question. My whole point of data collection and those companies and technology and how it empowers people today is that, at least in my lifetime and in the past, as I have studied through history, but I'm talking from living experiences, technology gives me, the no one, the non-rich person, the non-part of the government person, gives us a voice. And this is something this is part of my PhD. The whole idea of my PhD is that religion, in Islam specifically, is changing slowly through technology. Had we not, and when I say we, I mean Muslims, lay Muslims, had lay Muslims not have this tool in their hands, someone else will control them. And I don't want to say who, because I don't want to deviate the conversation too much. So it's we shouldn't demonize technology, but also we shouldn't let it control us 100%. Now we also have power. The point is to understand it and use this power.
On subject of women, children's rights, improving
Natalia, your connection's a little rough.
and also the subject.
So
Is it bad?
Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, yeah.
I'm not sure what's wrong with that.
Pardon?
Okay, go on ahead. Go on ahead.
No, I think
I'll,
I can hear you now. No, continue. Like, initially, it was kind of choppy. Yeah. But by the way, very quickly.
like making a long.
Very quickly, I think this for me is. I mean, the movie is chock-a-block full of fascinating moments, and so this is the character. What's her name? Riley Bina, right? She's played by Ariana Grande. So she's the major news story, right? As far as to what extent these technologies enable us, to what extent these technologies push forward or put forward or sort of prioritize certain views. So the scientists, they come to the table. They have news of an extinction level event, and they're not even interested in listening to them. Everyone's more interested in the news, the Daily Rep, and the newscasters. They're much more interested in listening to Riley Bina's story, and how she broke up with her boyfriend. She was like, when the person, I don't know, not an usher, but this guy who comes in to the green room and says, Riley Bina, you're going to be in next, and blah 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 blah. And Riley Bina's like, can I get to talk about my single, right? Because part of proceeds goes towards saving the manatees. And the guy's like, yeah, but as long as you talk more about your breakup with whatever his name is, right? So we have, and these technology, yes, they're incredible enablers, At the same time, I see Sophia shaking her head, but I mean, this is what we see in the movie, right? To stay with the movie.
No. Why you attribute that to technology? This was the traditional media. This was the traditional media, and it's a TV show. So the
Right.
traditional media, and this is what that's what I meant when I said earlier that I lived in an era that we were being fed from the TV whatever the TV wanted. Whereas now, with technologies, with social media, with people that they will watch this YouTube video, they have the choice.
Yeah.
So it's not the technology; it's the traditional media.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I don't say we don't at all. No. I mean, look, I'm not arguing. It's not for the sake. I mean, I'm genuinely. I want this to be a genuine exchange, and it's not about being right or wrong. But like, if we stick with the facts on the ground, right? I mean, we're academics here. I'm a trained thinker. This is what I do, and I'm very comfortable in holding a multiplicity of views. And it's really not about being right or wrong. But like, if we have, if the movie Don't Look Up is our text, right, to have a more capacious understanding of text. So and reading the text, right, where was I going? We speak of, right. So when the story between Riley Bina and her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, then he proposes, and she accepts, and you have Mindy's sons and his wife watching from her, and DiCaprio's character's wife, she's like, who are these people again? And they pull out their phones. Oh yeah, Bash just pushed all these notifications about this story, and then twice, like, it automatically buys one of Riley Bina's singles, and then it does it again. Like, genuinely, the question is, to what extent are we free? They are enablers, absolutely. I'm not saying one or the other, but this is a very real question we have to ask, like, as serious thinkers, right? Not just consumers. That and speaking of your point as well, Sophia, right? So I don't think we're necessarily. I mean, there are a lot of new things about these technologies, right? The interactivity, the interactive dimension, the agentive dimension, right? At the same time, it seems time and time again, right, to use Postman's turn of phrase, we're amusing ourselves to death. These technologies. So Postman wrote this in the 80s, if I'm not misremembering, originally published in 1985, right? And he was analyzing TV culture, how TV culture, the TV as a medium is not designed for serious exchange. Like, it's fundamentally, not that serious exchange can't be done, but it's really primarily designed for the lowest common denominator, like emotive stuff and things like that. Again, the fact that we're having this conversation online, and it's enabled certainly by the online medium, by YouTube and other platforms like that, and certainly some very serious thinkers, psychologists, philosophers, and on, are getting much more of having much more of a reach because of these media. At the same time, like, how many people are, like, on the whole, really tapping into this stuff, and how many people are really interested in the video of the puppy on the chicken, right? For example, Saad, did you have some thoughts, please?
Well, I'm a bit hesitant to enter into this debate because it might, potentially be intractable. But of course, I think what we can, concede is that there are both the aspects, to some extent at least. I mean, there's of course the element where the medium is. I mean, each medium, like for example, any communication. If it's a verbal communication, it's different. If it's a written communication, it's different. If it's via a visible screen, even though it's the same message, it carries a different sensibility with it. It carries different affect and different emotional power with it. But I mean, apart from that basic sense in which each technology in that sense already shapes its message to some extent. Apart from that, I also think it's again, Postman's point, I think, was also that ultimately this is inevitable. I mean, we will be living in the age of screens, and we have no option but to move ahead with this technology.
Just because something is inevitable,
Right.
is not
But of course, yeah. I mean, it is inevitable. But of course, I think if we are aware of how it is influencing us, we will better be able to deal with it.
right.
Because we have to deal with it at the end of the day, right?
No, and the image that I pulled up earlier, of God, right? Da Vinci's God handing over this phone to man, right? Giving life. I mean, the original image, right, in Sistine Chapel is God gives the spark of life to primordial man, or Adam, I guess in this case. But it's God handing over, like the primordial spark is in the phone. It's in the technology. Like these phones, as far as I can tell, these technologies have taken over, and it's only going to continue. It's a continuous intensification. Natalia, and we don't have to go on and on about this. We can talk about other aspects as well.
I mean, if Natalia, if you're going to speak about this, then you might. But there's another idea which I wanted to talk about. If you don't want to talk about this idea,
yeah, go for it.
Go on ahead.
Do you have any comments? Okay, sure. No, I mean, just in the spirit of coming back to the movie and coming back to one previous point which we touched upon, and which I think was really pivotal. If we can at this point make this transition, was the last dialogue which DiCaprio's character utters before the world comes to an end. He says that we really did have everything, didn't we?
Yes.
If you think about it.
That was beautiful. That was a beautiful moment. Yeah. We really did have everything, didn't we? If you think about it. Wow. And we lost it all. I wonder who the we is in this, but do you want to say a little bit more about that, Saad, and then we can.
No, that's all. I mean, I think that's a really deep moment to think about, to talk about. And it also ties back to Sophia's point about gratitude.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Sophia?
No comment on that. I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
Hopefully my connection is a little better now. Is that?
It's a little choppy, Natalia.
Or is it still slow?
It's a little choppy. So start talking. When you talk, sometimes it comes back.
It must be Irish weather related or something.
Okay.
I wanted to raise just because Sophia had mentioned how women and children have kind of fared better under capitalist systems, and I wanted to raise the what we see in the movie in terms of like how women are treated. So Kate obviously uncovers the comma. She's disbelieved, which is, a huge kind of societal issue in many
she's
ways.
depicted as this crazy woman.
Oh yeah, she's the emotional woman.
Right.
And then they make memes of her. But what was brilliant was when her ex-boyfriend wrote a book, Brush with the Devil. So she's demonized.
Oh, I did not pick up on that. He writes a book, Brush with the Devil. Are you serious? I saw the article, the crazy woman who said we were going to die. I slept with her. But he actually writes a book as well. Oh, wow. Yeah. That's interesting.
Demonized. So if you think of like how historically women have been treated, if you think of like the witch trials, for example, it's that demonization of the woman.
Yes.
Or, obviously then there's the mainstream kind of modern thought of women are too emotional. We've seen that in the US elections, for example, between Trump and Hillary Clinton,
Yes.
So, it's the same type of understanding and perception. And I find that really interesting. Also, like how she's sidelined. It was her find, it was her discovery, but Mindy takes center stage. He's the one who's in the Situation Room, pressing, kind of like release the rocket whenever they're going to kind of go after the first times, doing, some sort of Sesame Street type thing.
Right.
He then sits in. He becomes chief scientific officer or something like that.
Yeah, he's the AILF, right? Astronomer I'd like to F, right? But no, so he's like, so after Dibiansky has a kind of emotional outburst live on news, and then you have the newscasters, right, saying, you can come back. The hot astronomer can come back, but the The girl who thinks we're all gonna die, not so much, right? I
But
mean,
the
so
crazy thing is, she was the one who, that was her accepting the fate, what was to
yes,
come from the
yes,
very get-go. And
exactly. And
it took Mindy until his scene when he got arrested by the feds, then, whenever he had his
oh,
meltdown on TV, it took him all that time to fully
interesting.
accept what was coming. But she was the
Interesting.
one who accepted it first. And I find that really
Yeah.
interesting, that kind of dynamic, that male female dynamic that we see in society and how that was kind of like depicted on screen.
Yeah, yeah. Fascinating. Yeah, it's Sophia, any thoughts on that? Yeah.
I love the topic, and two things that I actually, for a woman, um, it made me. That's why I didn't find it funny. I didn't find the movie funny. So one thing is that they focused on her reaction, and this is typical. So when women are not being heard, it's typical that they blow up, and they focus on the reaction instead of her words, of the content of what she was saying. And the second thing, at the almost end of the movie, when we see her working as a supermarket in the till in the supermarket, and she doesn't care, she doesn't like that. Whereas at the beginning she is a prominent scientist that discovered the comet. But you see how, because she refused, and she is always, because her male colleague is trying to fit in and get profited by the situation on a personal level or professional level. She is the one who is clear to her conscience and is like, this is a problem, I have identified it, and I don't water it down. And because she refuses to fit in, and she wants to be true to herself, she ends up working in a forgotten supermarket. And this is something that, and I don't want to be dramatic, I don't like being dramatic, but it's something that many of us, we experience. It's like, and we experience it professionally and personally. It's like, if you want to have, as we were saying, if you want not to suffer and to be recognized and to have your needs met, then you need to water down yourself. You need to fit in boxes. And if you don't do it, you are erased. And that's why I didn't find it funny. For me, it's a living reality.
I mean, for what it's worth, I'm not a woman, but I thought her character was very well rounded. And her character, for me, comes from the get-go, comes across as she was really the star of the movie for me, really. And Mindy, I mean, to be fair to Mindy, right, DiCaprio's character, I thought he was trying to empower her, right, from the get-go. This even on the phone, the first time they're on the phone, and the person on the other end is like, oh, so did you discover it? And he's like, no, PhD candidate Dibiasky discovered it. And from the get-go, it's like, it's Dibiasky. So he was, I thought, a really great mentor. He struck me as a really good mentor. And I like their chemistry, like as mentor mentee. They had very good. Like, you tell it was a compassionate sort of connection they had. And then, of course, Mindy kind of gets sucked into the whole politicized nature of it all. And he's trying to play the game, right? Very early on, he's told that he needs media training, right? When they're being briefed before they go on the Daily Rip. And he takes a piece, takes a Xanax, but refuses to give her Xanax this time because she like snatches a piece from out of his hand before in the Oval Office. He's like, no, not this time, and then she kind of has her explosion. So he's trying to play the game, but then it turns out he ends up being played, right? So in other words, you cannot. I mean, this is at least one way of interpreting it, right? This movie, this text, that you, no matter how much you try, you ultimately cannot win at this game. You think you can, but you're.
I actually agree. Hopefully my sound is okay again. But I find it interesting that when they're in the bar, after it's come to light what they're going to do, that they're going to mine these kind of this comet. And Mindy said, basically kind of alludes to trying to change it from within. That is,
We're
you
trying to
as
change
an
what? What does she
individual
do?
trying to change, trying to use his influence from being part of,
And
you
Natalia,
know,
do you want to try one thing? Sorry, Natalia, you're choppy
from
still.
his
Natalia,
role within the White House, trying to use.
sorry.
Still here.
How about you try switching off your video, because if your kind of bit rate is a
Yes,
little
good.
low, at least we'll have your audio. So just switch off your video, please. Yeah,
Okay, so is that any better?
that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah, so his position within the White House, he seems to kind of think whenever he's kind of talking about it in the bar afterwards, you know, it's almost like he thinks he has influence and he can change things from being part of it. But as an
yes,
individual, you're never going to be able to, you know, an individual versus a collective. It's very
Yeah.
unlikely that you're going to be able to kind of affect change,
yes.
you know? I find that
Yes.
very interesting.
And he kind of becomes the poster boy for the whole thing, right? He becomes the poster boy. Saad?
Yeah. Well, I've got some comments about what we were discussing previously about the what's her name, Dibiaski's character.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, I think it's very clear that she is the sanest character of them all.
Yeah, I was going to
Right.
say the same thing exactly. She's actually the sanest of
reaction
them all.
is-
She gets it from the get-go. You see, Mindy, he's like freaking out. Like he's like really struggling to hold it in. He's on this whole like raft of meds. His wife comes and chucks everything in his face, right? As all, you know, for anxiety, depression, Cialis, to make sure he can perform in the bedroom, all that stuff. But she smokes her pot, and she's like really. After her initial mourning, she's like crying 5 times a day, right? Because it's like intense. But she gets her acting. I mean, I think she's the sanest of the lot.
Right. No, I think she's reacting to it how you're supposed to react to it.
Yes,
And
of course.
this one really, you know, a pivotal scene in the when they're in the you know, TV interview that they go for, and
Yeah.
the newscaster tells her that, you know, we're actually trying to keep things light over here.
Yeah,
But she
because that's
she
what
says
we
in
do.
response-
We're in the business
she
of
says
keeping
that, you know,
news light.
right. And her response is, maybe it's supposed to be terrifying. It's not supposed to be lighthearted.
Exactly.
It's supposed to terrify you and scare you. Right?
Yeah.
And I think this is a really, you know, I mean, I'd like to hear what Natalia has to say about this, because I think this ties with mental health, and throughout this whole movie we see this attitude that it's more important to be happy than face the truth about what's going to happen.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
this has, of course, deep currents in our society as well, and many trends in our society.
Yes. Awesome.
Yes,
Yeah.
I do agree. I find it very, from a behavioral perspective, very interesting. You know, avoidance, the aspect of distance. You know, this is in the future, as I said earlier on. The inability to future pace, for example. You know, to envisage what's coming at you down the track.
Yes.
The what else was there? Sorry, I had because I had loads of notes on this. So the avoidance, denial,
Yes.
also escapism. You know, so
Yes.
if you take Mindy, for example, he decides that's the time. You know, if you're told you have 6 months to live
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're
He has an affair.
going to have an affair, you know,
Yeah.
what's going on there? You know, quite possibly, because, I mean, sometimes whenever there's a catastrophic event in your life, it does make you you become a bit more aware of your own existence and then driven by your own desires. It comes back to this conversation we had earlier on about needs and things like that. You know, are they always needs, or are they sometimes desires, you know? And I think
And are we trying to cover something? Yeah.
desires.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, go on. Keep going. Oh, do we lose you? Natalia, can't hear you.
No, sorry, I'm still here.
Oh, yeah.
I'm switching buttons so you can definitely hear me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
Good.
know what's going on with this Newton Abbey internet connection, which tells me it's fine, but clearly it's not. Yeah, so I find the human behavioral aspects really interesting. I'll tell you what
It's
else
so
I find.
spot on.
Pardon?
And it's so spot on.
Oh yeah, totally
Right.
spot on. You know, just this idea that we're going to. Oh, and also like projection. Projection was a big one. So this is Kate. You know, whenever the president is giving her speech whenever they decide they're going to do something
Yeah,
about this comet. And she's doing her speech, and she says as part of the speech, "This is Kate, and the comet's named after her, but don't blame her."
yeah.
You know, that is like a subconscious message, really, like a subliminal message that you're putting into the heads of the people who are watching. Do
Yeah.
blame her, you know, because you're going to, it's like reverse psychology,
Yeah,
you know. So why would you even associate her with blame? I
right.
find that really kind of interesting, you know. But again, like this idea that a woman would be kind of scapegoated.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but what I find really fascinating was the creation type message. So if you listen to Kate talking on the street to her ex-boyfriend at the time before they go into the Herald,
Yes.
and she talks about a catastrophic event that was on the same scale as that which took out the dinosaurs, for example.
Yes.
So the dinosaur, the what happened with the dinosaurs from a theory perspective,
Yeah.
allowed us as humans and as a species to flourish
Yes.
thereafter. Um, it was interesting that we were going full circle in our own kind of creation cycle. This
Interesting.
thing
Right.
was going to wipe, you know, the same thing that wiped out the dinosaurs from a theory viewpoint,
Yes.
was what was going to take us out as well. You
Yes.
know, so it was like we'd done our full loop, and that was it. The earth was kind of cleansing itself. You know,
Wow.
so the tsunami, the water,
Oh
the
yeah.
symbolism of the water. There was there's a couple of like flashing scenes where like there's a baby being baptized, for example.
Yes. Beautiful. Yes. Yes.
You
Yes.
know, I also find the naked people on the new planet to be quite like
Oh, they're like
much
the
like Adam and Eve.
right, right,
You know,
in the New Eden. Yes. Oh,
exactly.
profound. Yes. Yes. Yes.
You know, so I
Amazing.
find those kind of like threads really fascinating
Yes.
in terms of how we began and how we end and the full
Wow.
circle
Yes.
of our existence.
Beautiful. Sophia, did you have any? Would you like to pick up on any of that, or?
No. I absolutely agree with Natalia on these points. I'm not quite sure 100% whether this was the intention of the creators or not. But as every piece of art, a movie is also subject to interpretation.
Yeah.
So for example, the nudity on the last scene, for me, I didn't see it as, and I didn't connect it with Adam and Eve. I connected it with loss of power and loss of hierarchy, that they were all equal.
Yeah.
And they were all the same thing, and there was no, nothing to distinguish them.
Right.
But again, it depends on point of view that you see things.
Right. Right. Sad?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that. I just think if you're open to another key point in the movie, which we touched upon in the beginning, is the attitude towards science and towards
Oh,
scientific
good.
practice,
Yes, very
right?
important. Yeah.
And of course, this has a really clear parallel with the recent COVID vaccine reactions that we've seen, and this large distrust for scientific authority. I think in the case of COVID vaccines, it's quite more controversial than what we have over here, because we have reason for some amount of distrust or some amount of apprehension related to big pharma because of some of their history. But we also, at the end of the day, modern medicine is based upon big pharma, and modern medicine wouldn't be there without it.
Yes.
And so all of the gains that we have are also because of that. And I think that requires some level of expertise or scientific expertise in order to be able to make out whether, in which case it is actually the case, or in which case we're being misled.
Yes.
And that respect for expertise, or that or the lack of that respect, is what we see in this movie, and in our reactions to vaccines, etc.
Yeah, I think that even though the movie was written, Brian McKay, he wrote it before COVID, but it just happens to be the case that it kind of matches up with that, and that's a huge, I think, discussion in and of itself. That what is the nature of authority, right? What is the nature of Foucault's power knowledge, right? What are the what are the incentives, what are the disincentives for the creation of technologies? If we take modern medicine writ large as a type of technology, so big pharma incentivizing certain, in general, like this is just historic, putting aside the question of things that you mentioned. It's a very interesting discussion, and I think as someone who's a very avid and serious reader of Foucault and history in general, I think we're going through some very interesting shifts. There was a moment in the movie which I thought was, I mean, the movie again is chock a block full of very powerful moments, but the movie in the movie, Total Devastation, right, which is going to come out the day the comet hits, right? They spend $300 million making it, but they're interviewing the director, and he says, I'm wearing a badge which has an arrow pointing up and an arrow pointing down, and he says, right, the point of this is to paraphrase, right, there's too much disunity. We need to come together in agreement, putting aside our differences. It's I thought that was a very beautiful moment. It's a very short moment, but a very beautiful moment. That it's not about, in some ways, it's not even about who's right or wrong. In a way, it's about, again, coming together and uniting.
Yeah, I mean, one point of contention with that would be, it could also be, I mean, for example, if you consider the case of climate change,
yeah,
that kind of attitude could be problematic, where someone is trying to say that, okay, there are good, or I mean, there's some validity to both the ends of the spectrum.
right.
Those who are speaking about climate change and the
Yes.
deniers, and that seems kind of like an irresponsible attitude, especially in the context of climate change, right?
Right. No, I think again, so these are important points, and I can't, what immediately comes to mind again for me is the nature of discourse, right? In the Foucauldian sense, how are certain regimes of knowledge produced, right? So, and DiCaprio mentions this in an actual interview that was, or a conversation amongst, I mean, like few of the cast members and the director, they're kind of sitting on the wrong table and they're talking about some of these things. And he actually makes the point. So as someone who spoke at the UN, right, DiCaprio spoke at the UN 7 years ago, famously, right, addressing the question of climate change. And he's like the UN's, or was at least, something ambassador, like had some fancy title, whatever. And he even made the point, if I'm not mistaken, in more recently for the next Netflix thing, that 100 companies, 100 corporations create 70% of global carbon emissions. That's a really hard figure to wrap one's head around. Very easy to say, but very hard to fathom. In other words, right, the way the narrative is constructed by and large in the mainstream discourse is that we everyday people have to cut our consumption and lower our carbon footprints, etc., which it's true. It's most likely true, right? I mean, that stands to reason, right? If someone in Europe, living in Europe myself, if my carbon footprint, to use that metric, right, is something like 100 or 200 times, I forget the actual figures, more that of the average person living in Bangladesh, for example, then there's something amiss there, right? Whereas, right, as far as we can tell, as far as the science is showing us, a country like Bangladesh will suffer the most, is suffering the most already due to climate change. So there's this disparity, right? People who have the biggest impact thus far paying less of a price. So all of that being said, I don't see it being mentioned enough that these corporations are playing a massive role, the biggest role as far as our climactic denudation and seeming inevitable destruction, right? Sophia?
Well, the interesting thing, based on what you said now, it's the role of the everyday people, which when I was watching the movie, whenever there were scenes in the bars or in the scenes that the people, they go crazy and they destroy everything around them. So I could see myself there, somewhere there. And to connect it to whatever Saad mentioned about the COVID and the distrust or blind trust on science, it's difficult. We live in difficult times, and yes, I do believe that technology empowers us to a certain extent, but at the same time, the same exposure to massive quantity of knowledge very often contradicting each other. So the information contradicts one another. It makes you feel powerless, because at the end of the day, you can't even make up your mind. You feel that you need more information, and there is no certainty, because you think also, I mean, personally, I also think that, okay, I do have this piece of information, but who produces it? What is the benefit of the producer of this information or piece of knowledge? And at the end of the day, my most favorite scene of the movie, after all this mess and the power dynamics and the scientists and the governors and the money, for me, the most beautiful scene is the scene of reconciliation between DiCaprio and his family, and how also the female scientist belongs nowadays, because we see throughout the movie, we see the Binsky, the main the female scientist, we see her being, you know, pushed out of collectivities, but at the end she finds herself in this family. And then, whereas, you know, the world is being destroyed, they are there, they know that the world is being destroyed, but they have realized the limitations of their humanity, and they're just waiting for the inevitable, making the best out of their moments, being together. And this was the touching moment, and the moment that I mean, if you ask me what is the message, how this movie will change you, I will say that knowing that I'm not someone with power in my hands, for better or for worse, this is the message. Live in the moment, make peace with your people around you, accept one another. Because if you remember in the scene when DiCaprio returns to his wife, there is a moment when the two are just in the frame, and the wife also says that, you know, you slept with this lady, but I slept with someone as well. And you see that they're both like, okay. So for me, it's like, accept each other weaknesses, accept our humanity, and worry to a certain extent, try to learn and understand to a certain extent. But at the end of the day, what matters is the moment, is the people, you know, to be close to each other and understanding to each other.
Well, I know, I agree. That was a very beautiful moment, and also, I mean, Tyler mentioned this before as well. It was a deeply religious moment. I mean, you have the young guy, the skateboarder dude, right, who proposes to Dibiasky in the car, and she accepts, and he turns out he's an evangelical. It's very interesting. And this movie is neither liberal nor conservative. People are like, oh, this is some liberal thing. It's not simplistically liberal at all, because that I mean, for me, that was, excuse me, the landmark moment, because the movie ends there. We have two subsequent scenes afterwards. They're almost like hidden scenes right there, but and it ends with him praying. I mean, the prayer which follows them sort of talking about ground coffee and things like that, trying to not talk about the thing. But I came across this quote yesterday, which I'll very quickly share, which illustrates the point I was trying to raise earlier, vis-a-vis, you know, the contribution of corporations. So, and this is taken from an article. More than anything, Don't Look Up is about the Utah Phillips quote I opened this review with. It's about how we need to realize that this isn't a natural disaster. It's the disaster created by a handful of people with immense wealth and power. And we know who they are, or at least we have the ability to know who they are. And we know that they are happy to continue business as usual until we all die. Another enraging moment in McKay's film is when, as disaster finally becomes inevitable, the ruling class uses a secret rocket to escape while everyone else burns. The people killing the earth have names and addresses, and there are many, many, many more of us than there are of them, which means we have immense power after all. As we at Left Voice often repeat, the working class makes literally everything run and can shut it all down if we choose to, and I'm tired of risking my life for their profits. I've looked up, I've seen the comet, I've looked up. but if we can maybe talk about the very, the prayer that did we talk about this already? Jonah Hill's character, the prayer he makes. By the way, he ad-libbed that prayer. Do you remember, Natalia, the prayer? What is the prayer that he makes?
About the staff?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't remember that. I didn't note the words of that one because it didn't really. It was things that kind of really resonated with me that I kind of made particular note
No,
of.
that's fair.
And the stuff thing was certainly not something that personally resonates with
No,
me.
I know, but I thought it was a hilarious moment, right? So he's like, I just want to, I'm paraphrasing, I just want to say a prayer for stuff, all the amazing things like bags and houses and cars, all that amazing. I just want, I thought that was, and what's the very final scene? Like, because I didn't even catch it in my first viewing. Did everyone catch the very final scene? Saad?
Where
Yeah. Which one? Which is the one?
Okay, it's like a hidden scene. Okay, right at the end. So he's okay. Here we are. I'm not going to play the scene, obviously, but here's an image from the scene. Is this? So
Right.
he's like, he comes, last man alive, last man in the world. He's like, and he's holding this handbag. What you made a comment about this, Natalia? What was the comment that you made?
Yeah, since he's such a mummy's boy, I thought it was funny that he was holding this handbag, which I assumed to be his mother's, and I wondered if his testicles were in there too.
And then he's like, here I am, last man in the world, like and subscribe, like and subscribe to the very end, right? I mean, it's hilarious. I thought that was genius, a beautiful touch. But any sort of final thoughts as we sort of
Can I just say, I
Yeah.
find the references to nature really fascinating, and I thought that, to me, those references, those visual references of nature, and then there was another one of like an indigenous man kind of singing in, like celebrating the forthcoming common, I suppose you could say. And then obviously then if you take the family scene
he
where
was
they're
like
all,
a shaman, right?
yeah, where they're
Yeah.
all having dinner together then,
Yeah.
and as Sophia said, the acceptance of each other.
Yes.
To me, all of those references together was
Beautiful, yeah.
submission. It
Mm.
was,
Was
it
what?
was submission.
Submission. Wow.
Submission
Yeah.
to the creator, and what's kind of like divine willed, what's fated, and that acceptance of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I thought that was
And
really beautiful.
and also kind of it comes up in a car, right? When they're listening, they're going, the three of them, the skater dude and Dibiaski and DiCaprio, they're driving to Mindy's house, and the song is playing, right? And Mindy sort of breaks it down, the lyrics, right, about doing the work, right? I'm not going to do it justice, but does anyone remember the lyrics? How it's about, Sal, do you remember?
No, sorry.
Like that maybe what we're doing will be of use, and I can't remember. Anyway, there's some very beautiful, heartfelt moments, I think, throughout the movie, despite it being, sort of a dark comedy. It was very, for me at least, very touching. Amazing. So any sort of final thoughts while we get it's yeah.
Yeah, one thought which I was reminded of this when Natalia was speaking just now about nature and about those things. Of course, we have that statement of the prophet: plant a sapling, even if the hour is coming.
Oh wow!
And
yeah,
I think this, I mean, looking at it from this perspective, is how would we react if we were in such a situation where the world is coming to an end, and would we still have the internal motivation to go around doing things and going ahead with our lives?
Beautiful.
And another really key moment is, of course, the final dinner scene. For me, that really is at the heart of the movie, and because I mean, when everything is coming to an end, and when everything seems so meaningless and nihilistic, or so bleak, in that moment of your shared in that shared moment with family and with your loved ones, you create that meaning and you create that purpose. And
I
I
mean,
think
the importance of
that
eating
even
meals together, right? I mean, it's very kind of not only, but it's very theologically speaking, it's very Christian, of course. It's a very Christian moment and
right.
very beautiful for that. in
Did
that
you
regard.
happen to notice as
Yeah.
well what they said when they were eating the meal? It was like everything tasted better. You know, so
Yes,
the chocolate
yes,
pie tasted like really good,
yeah,
you know,
Right.
and the coffee was tasted, you know, stronger and different. And
yes,
I think that goes back to what like Sophia was saying earlier about gratitude,
yes,
you know,
yes, yes,
and
yes,
how
yes.
everything changes when you kind of shift your perspective in that way.
Yeah, beautiful. Really. Yeah, I was trying to pull up an image from the table. Yeah, I mean, so
But you
well,
see, I
thank you.
mean,
Yeah,
shall
yeah,
I say something
please.
finally? You see how even our collective discussion ends up there. So in the movie, you see three different types of people.
Yeah.
One type is the president and the rich people that they try to find an alternative to their demise and they try to escape, which they don't. We see that the birds will eat them. We know before the movie finish. The second type is the son with all these material, his addiction to materialism, and that the most important thing is the stuff. And we see him. I mean, he doesn't even realize. For me, this scene, and I'm sorry to say that, Hassan, you found it funny. I didn't find it funny. I found it
I'm
very, very
British. You
sad.
have to accept that I'm British. I have
No,
a
Greek.
I
So
have
we're
a
different.
very dark sense of humor.
No,
It comes from many years of living in miserable weather. You lived
I-
in sun for most of your life.
True, which I don't like. But no, I don't judge you. It's just that I perceive it cognitively. I perceive it differently. For me, it was
Yeah,
sad that there is no one. You ask someone to subscribe, there is no one. You're alone.
yeah.
And the third type of people were the one that they submitted, they accepted, and they were just waiting. And you see how all of us, we were being touched by these people. So to bring it back, I don't think that the intention of the movie was to evoke religious sentiment. But if we take it from that perspective, I
Yeah.
believe that religiously, it's all about letting go, doing your best. They did their best, but at the end, they submitted. And this is the bliss. This
Oh,
is the whole
shit.
point.
Yeah, I mean, so I my connection I think dropped out for a split second. I think with saying my internet connection is unstable, but it's hard to say because you know what I did? I accidentally hit play on Netflix, but that's what was happening. It's hard to say. I mean, because my background is in English, I have a bachelor's in English, so that's like my first kind of foray into the academic world. It's hard to ascribe intentionality to any art. Like, I mean, this is a very kind of postmodern conceit, right? That you know, the text is read, you know, by the reader in sort of unique ways. So it's hard to impute intentionality per se. But I mean, at least that was how I read it. You know, I inevitably bring a very sort of you know, theological lens to things, and for me, it is ultimately a very hopeful movie. That if we left to our own devices, not I don't have a phone on me, but not these devices, right? Not our phones, but left to our own basic fundamental selves, coming together as human beings, doing simple things like breaking bread together, right? Having meals, sharing stories, just loving each other. Being, you know, the skater dude, he's another very real character. Like, he's a very, you know, maybe I mean, he's not extremely well illustrated. I mean, he's not extensively illustrated, but he's a very kind of wholesome character, right? And he talks about God. Oh, so in the car before he makes the proposal, he says he asks Mindy for permission to be vulnerable, right? And so he's like trying to be real. And it's I think that's what it's about. It's about meeting each other in states of naked vulnerability, you know, not waiting till the whole world explodes and we have to go to some far distant planet 25,000 years down the line before we become naked, right? Like let's be real, let's be honest, let's be loving, let's be caring. Don't look up. It's maybe, I mean, of course, don't look up, the title means do look up, right? We need to experience, someone mentioned to me recently, and I thought that, and this has been my sense as well for a number of years now, that it's hard to be, it's actually David Armstrong who's been on our podcast before, that it's hard to be enchanted, or maybe, I can't remember how he phrased it exactly, but something along the lines, it's hard to be re-enchanted until we can see a true night sky, right? Because if we look up, we just see, because of all the light pollution, right? Speaking of the effects of the deleterious effects of technology, we no longer see, I mean, I remember my first ever experience of a true night sky was a number of years ago, 2000 actually, in year 2000, I was in Spain, in a very remote part of Spain, and it was no light pollution. Oh my God, to see the night sky in all her real beauty is something to behold. It cannot be put into words, like, which is completely unsurprising. I mean, it's therefore unsurprising that the ancients have always through history written extensively about the night sky and the beauty, and that sort of seen meaning, ascribed meaning to it, and so forth. And now we just look up and we see, if we're lucky, 1 or 2 stars. So maybe it is about looking up. Maybe one of the deeper messages of the movie is do look up, but in order to really look up, we have to look within. I don't know. I just made that up. But all right, guys, amazing, really wonderful. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that as much as I did watching the movie nearly 3 times, because I was in preparation for today. I was rewatching it on high speed. Speaking, I mean, to Sophia's point about look, I'm a total tech junkie. As for someone who loves to, I'm a total tech junkie. Like, I'm surrounded by, if you see some of I'm surrounded by tech.
But let's complain about technology, huh?
Well, no, I mean, look, it's I'm a hypocrite, like I said before. I try to own my hypocrisy. But I can't remember where I was going with that. So tech junkie, hypocrisy, it's okay. It's gone now.
It's time for lunch, guys. I don't know where you are, but here's time for lunch. When I was
rewatching it a 3rd time, I had it on fast forward, not fast forward, like, you can adjust the speed now to like 1.25 or 1.5. So I was watching on like 1.5 speed, trying to get through it quickly. And it's awesome. Anyway, all right, guys, God bless. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all for joining. And
lovely to meet you all. Thank you.
Like and subscribe.
Nice to meet you all.
Like and subscribe. That's not enough. Not yet.
All right. Okay.